When one pictures a city, what often follows are images of bustling streets filled with pedestrians and heavy traffic, shops filled with customers, and of course buildings of all shapes and sizes. Some very small with very basic designs, and others impressively tall with ornate features covering their facades.
Despite the time and dedication that it takes to design a building, very few people actually take the time to study and appreciate them for what they really are. Like any art form, I believe that architecture should be celebrated for its creativity and innovation, such as this building right here.
Known as the Two Republics Building, it was designed in 1920 by Henry C. Trost and completed 2 years later. It served as the offices for his firm Trost and has stood strong for over a century with some unfortunate modern modifications. While some might argue that this building is out of date, its design was carefully thought out with many details and curves that make it far more visually appealing than the glass monoliths of today. If you don't mind my saying so, it's quite a remarkable piece within Trost's portfolio. But what makes Trost or his building so special? How did he get his start? And why did he venture into the world of architecture? And why is it important to preserve these buildings instead of alter and destroy them? Well, like any good story, it is best told by starting at the beginning. Born in Toledo, Ohio in 1860 to German immigrants, Trost would begin to develop an interest in architecture, which would result in him gaining a job studying architecture for the firm Adler & Sullivan in Chicago after winning a drawing contest in 1890. After Chicago, Trost moved around from place to place in the West, making stops in Denver and Tucson before settling in El Paso, where he would create his architecture firm, Trost & Trost Architects and Engineers, with his brother Gustavus Adolphus Trost, and living out the rest of his days before his death in 1933.
One place where Trost's work is best observed is right here where they were created, in downtown El Paso, Texas. Works such as the Mills Building and the Hilton Hotel stand as examples of just how influential Trost's work actually was to the area.
Both the Two Republics Building and the Mills Building are examples of commercial office buildings, both of which embody strong elements of the Chicago style of buildings Trost learned while in the employ of Louis Sullivan. The Mills Building was completed in 1911, but the Hilton didn't begin construction until 1929 and was completed the following year. The Hilton Hotel was a monumental building that was meant for much more than just an overnight stay by visitors. The Hilton Hotel was a massive residential building and was constructed right at the moment of the stock market crash and through the beginning of the Great Depression. Because of the recent economic crash, every sign pointed to the likelihood that the building would not see completion, or it would bankrupt its owners in the process. However, Conrad Hilton persisted, and what stands today is an incredible structure standing tall above the surrounding scenery. While Trost could design impressive skyscrapers, he could also work small and create the simple things. As Ernest Hemingway wrote to his editor Maxwell Perkins in 1932, "Eschew the monumental, shun the epic. All the guys who can paint great big paintings can paint great small ones." Within an architectural perspective, Trost was doing exactly what Hemingway alluded to. He designed hundreds of single-family residences, with many being located in El Paso or the surrounding areas such as Las Cruces. Preeminent among these is Trost's own home, located in the Sunset Heights neighborhood in El Paso. Beginning in 1906, Trost had begun designing his house in the prairie style popularized by Frank Lloyd Wright, with construction being completed in 1909. What makes his house so significant is that it is quite possibly the best example of the prairie style within the entirety of Texas, and to think it found its home in little old El Paso. While Trost's architecture is quite pervasive across the Southwest, some of his pieces have been mistreated and destroyed unjustly without being given a second chance, such as the Las Cruces Country Club building, the Brazos Apartments in El Paso, and the Masonic Temple in El Paso. While one could create the argument that these buildings are old and could easily be replaced with better buildings, may I propose a thought experiment? What would you say to someone who wanted to destroy a Renaissance painting just because no one knew who painted it? My point is that architecture is like art, and it needs to be preserved, restored, and expanded upon. Of course these buildings have become old and outdated. However, improvements and renovations can make these buildings useful again, and it's what we ought to be doing with our buildings. For instance, after a long period of the Hilton Hotel being vacant, new restoration efforts have begun to return it into a commercial residential building and connect it to the Crest department store building. The El Capitan Hotel in Van Horn, Texas has also undergone a recent restoration effort. This restoration effort is more significant than most because, unlike most of the buildings I've mentioned, the El Capitan is in a very small town that most people just pass through. You wouldn't expect a building like that to ever survive for this long, let alone have a restoration effort. And if grandiose buildings such as the El Capitan or the Hilton Hotel can still manage to be useful with just a little bit of work, Isn't that better than destroying a historical and cultural landmark? It's our duty as citizens of the Southwest to preserve and to celebrate our culture, and that becomes a considerably more difficult task when we choose to replace our art with soulless structures. We are inspired by our surroundings, and so we must maintain that we live in a beautiful world where the streets are lined with the creative works of innovators. Just as when we go to an art museum and ponder the works of Van Gogh, Picasso, Monet, and Da Vinci, we should also appreciate the structures that we live, work, eat, and sleep in, because the people who designed these buildings were just as full of creativity as those who made the greatest paintings. So the next time you decide to take a stroll through the town, take a moment and ask yourself, what would it be like if we didn't have such creative and passionate architects around?